They were born to rule, but not always to love. Across centuries and kingdoms, royal engagements have shaped alliances, ended wars, and carved the fate of empires. But behind the veils and the velvet were 5 royal unions that fell apart, not with quiet dignity, but with scandal, defiance, and political fallout. A British princess wept as duty forced her to choose between the throne and her heart. A king fell for a foreign girl the palace would never accept. A Tudor bride broke with tradition and nearly sparked a European power struggle. A Swedish queen stunned all of Christendom by rejecting the one man her crown demanded she marry. And a German princess crossed the sea to marry England's most dangerous king, only to be discarded before their wedding night even began. This is not the fairy tale version of royalty. These are the royal engagements that were broken, publicly, painfully, and forever. Welcome to 5 strange royal engagements that ended in scandal, where history meets heartbreak and love meets power. If you're fascinated by the secret stories of royalty, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which broken royal match shocked you the most. Now, let the scandals unfold. 1. Princess Charlotte and Prince William of Orange. Britain, 1814. The war with Napoleon is reaching its climax. Europe trembles, alliances are shifting, and the House of Hanover seeks a new future. At the heart of this turbulent moment stands a young woman, intelligent, passionate, and fiercely independent. Her name, Princess Charlotte of Wales. She was the only legitimate grandchild of King George III, the future queen, the hope of a restless nation, and the victim of a royal bargain she refused to honor. Charlotte was just 17, but she was no naive girl. She had lived through the scandal of her parents' public hatred. Her father, the extravagant and loathed Prince Regent, and her mother, the exiled Caroline of Brunswick. Charlotte had grown up watching the disintegration of love behind palace walls. So when her father demanded she marry Prince William of Orange, Charlotte didn't see a match made for love. She saw a political trap. Prince William of Orange was the heir to the Dutch throne, recently restored by the Allies. He was everything Charlotte wasn't: reserved, stiff, and painfully obedient to the idea of duty. His manners were awkward, his smile rare. But what truly enraged Charlotte was the deal behind her back. To marry William, she would be expected to live not in Britain, but in Holland. Worse still, her husband had made it clear Charlotte's mother, whom she adored, would not be welcome there. The Prince Regent had struck a devil's bargain, one that would banish her from her homeland, from her allies, from her mother, all in the name of diplomacy. This was not a wedding proposal. It was a political exile dressed in lace. Charlotte protested. She wept. She begged. But when her father cornered her into accepting, she played along, until the final moment. The engagement was announced, the papers signed, and then she revolted. Just weeks after the engagement, Charlotte broke it off, publicly, boldly. She told the nation she would not go quietly. She would not marry a man she didn't love. She would not leave her country. The press exploded. The people took her side. For the first time in decades, the British public rallied around a royal woman who dared to say no. Her father was humiliated. This was not how princesses behaved, especially not future queens. Charlotte was punished, confined, watched, her every letter read. At one point, she even attempted to flee Carlton House in a hired hackney carriage, a princess on the run, only to be dragged back hours later, surrounded by guards and shame. But her stand, reckless, brave, unforgettable, would change the monarchy. Charlotte may have rejected William of Orange, but she had embraced something far more powerful: the right to choose. She would later find love, briefly, with Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, a man she married not for duty, but for devotion. Their joy was radiant, and tragically short-lived. Charlotte died in childbirth in 1817, aged just 21. The nation plunged into mourning. But her first great act of rebellion, her refusal to marry William of Orange, would echo long after her death. For a generation of women, she became a symbol of resistance, a royal who broke the rules not for scandal, but for dignity. She was the bride who said no, a princess who chose principle over politics. And in doing so, she wrote her own chapter, brief, defiant, unforgettable, in the brutal history of royal unions. 2. Edward VIII and Princess Marie of Romania. Before Wallis Simpson, the twice-divorced American whose relationship with Edward VIII forced him to abdicate the throne and shattered the royal succession, there was another woman, another chance, another union, quietly arranged, barely whispered, and buried before it ever breathed. This is the story of Edward VIII and Princess Marie of Romania, a royal match extinguished before it could ignite. He was the crown jewel of the House of Windsor, Prince Edward, the dashing globe-trotting heir who captured headlines and hearts in equal measure. The Roaring Twenties had just begun, and Britain was desperate for something young, something hopeful, something that looked like the future. And he was it. She was Princess Marie of Romania. Blonde, graceful, educated in the arts, fluent in multiple languages, and a descendant of both British and Russian royalty. Her mother, Queen Marie of Romania, was a formidable force, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria and one of the shrewdest monarchs in post-war Europe. In her daughter's future, the Queen saw a crown and a seat beside the British throne. A marriage between the two could unite East and West. It could tether Romania closer to Britain and help stabilize Europe's fragile peace. At least, that was the dream. In 1924, quiet talks began, discreet inquiries, royal eyes watching each other across long tables. Edward met Marie, twice, perhaps 3 times. But something wasn't right. Though beautiful and poised, Marie was only 15. Edward, 30. He found her shy, uncomfortable, a child cloaked in expectation. He didn't want a child bride, and Marie, though pressured, didn't want to be a pawn. She had no desire to trade the Carpathians for the cold etiquette of Buckingham Palace. Behind the scenes, her mother pushed. The Queen wrote letters, arranged meetings, lobbied quietly but firmly. The British court was cordial but evasive. Edward, famously evasive. He had no intention of marrying for politics, no desire to play the dutiful prince. He was already falling in love with something else entirely. Freedom, the freedom to travel, the freedom to choose, the freedom to love whom he pleased, even if they were divorced, American, or utterly unthinkable to the royal establishment. This wasn't just a broken match. It was a symptom of what was coming. By early 1925, the idea of the marriage was dead. No formal announcement, no scandal, just a gentle vanishing, a royal ghost story in real time. Marie would later marry into Yugoslavian royalty, a prince, not a king. Her marriage too would prove loveless and strained. She faded from history's stage, elegant but unseen. And Edward, we know what came next. A decade later, he would give up the crown for another woman, another love deemed unacceptable. He would become the king who couldn't keep the throne. But maybe he had already shown us who he was long before. The match with Marie was the last time Edward came close to doing what was expected of him, to marrying well, to following the script. But he tore up the script, quietly at first, then spectacularly. And it began here, with a young Romanian princess and a prince already slipping from duty's grasp. It was the union that died in the cradle. Too cold to burn, too political to breathe, and too mismatched to survive. And in its silence, it whispered everything about the man who would one day give it all away. 3. Anne of Cleves and Henry VIII. It was the marriage that should have cemented an alliance. Instead, it became a punchline, an awkward kiss, a royal rejection, and perhaps the most humiliating chapter in the love life of England's most infamous king. This is the story of Anne of Cleves and Henry VIII, a union not of passion, but of diplomacy, that Henry would escape with stunning speed. The year was 1539. Anne Boleyn was dead. Jane Seymour too. Henry VIII, now in his late 40s and increasingly desperate for another male heir, was in the market for a queen, not a mistress, not a flirtation, but a political bride to strengthen Protestant alliances on the continent. His chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, had a plan. Look to the German states, find an ally against Catholic France and the Holy Roman Empire. And in Cleves, they found her, Anne. She was described as modest, virtuous, well educated in household duties. She spoke no English, danced poorly, and had little formal training in courtly manners, but her portrait, painted by the great Hans Holbein, promised a woman of quiet beauty and regal presence. Henry agreed. The marriage treaty was signed. Anne sailed to England, and then came the meeting. In a foolish attempt at romance, Henry disguised himself and barged into Anne's quarters at Rochester Castle, hoping for a fairy tale moment of instant attraction. What he got instead was polite confusion. Anne, untrained in English customs, didn't recognize the king. She barely acknowledged him. No swoon, no thrill, no spark, just silence, perhaps a curtsy. Henry was furious. "She is nothing so fair as she hath been reported," he grumbled. "She is no better than a Flanders mare." That infamous insult, whether truly spoken or not, would echo through the centuries. On January 6, 1540, the marriage took place. Henry was bitter, Anne was bewildered, and the union was never consummated. Henry later claimed he was simply unable, that his bride repelled him, that nothing moved him. He tried twice and each time failed. Anne, for her part, claimed she thought everything was normal, that she didn't know what consummation involved. Whether she was feigning ignorance or truly innocent, no one can say for sure. But what is certain is that the king wanted out. The very man who had arranged the match, Thomas Cromwell, now found himself in peril. His power was slipping. His enemies circled, and Henry wanted a divorce. Just 6 months after the wedding, it was over. The marriage was annulled on the grounds of non-consummation and pre-contract. Anne accepted graciously. She was given money, estates, and the honorary title of king's beloved sister. And in a court littered with execution blocks and bloodied veils, Anne survived. She kept her head. She stayed in England. She lived comfortably, respected and free from the toxic machinery of Tudor politics. While other queens went to the scaffold, Anne of Cleves went to her garden. Henry had escaped a marriage he never wanted. Anne had escaped a man known for destroying the women closest to him. And Cromwell? He was not so lucky. Blamed for the debacle, he was executed. A victim of the same politics he once controlled. It was the king's great escape, and perhaps hers too. A royal union that was never real, never passionate, never consummated, but never forgotten. 4. Mary Tudor and Charles of Castile. She was a Tudor princess, beautiful, strong-willed, and beloved by the English people. He was a Habsburg prince, heir to one of the most powerful empires the world had ever known. Their betrothal was not a love match, but a grand design, a promise meant to bind kingdoms. And yet, it unraveled before it ever truly began. This is the story of Mary Tudor and Charles of Castile, a royal engagement celebrated with fanfare, but destined for disappointment. Born in 1496, Mary was the youngest surviving child of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. Graceful and charming, she was considered one of the great beauties of European royalty. Her brother, the future Henry VIII, adored her. But Mary was also a powerful bargaining chip in England's foreign policy. And so, in 1507, at just 11 years old, She was betrothed. Charles of Castile, barely 7, was the grandson of the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. His future was staggering. Spain, the Netherlands, the Holy Roman Empire, and England wanted to be part of that future. The engagement was sealed, letters exchanged, celebrations held. Mary would grow up as the promised bride of Charles, future Emperor Charles V. It was an alliance forged in politics. But even the strongest political threads can snap in shifting winds. As the years passed, the political landscape shifted. Henry VII died in 1509. His son, now King Henry VIII, had his own ideas about alliances and about his sister's future. Charles's inheritance was growing too vast, too threatening. England worried it might become a vassal in a Habsburg-dominated world. By 1513, Mary was a young woman, 17 in her prime, unmarried, and still officially promised to a boy she hadn't seen in a decade. But the winds had turned. In 1514, the engagement was formally broken. No scandal, no fight, just politics. Charles's representatives were informed. The alliance was deemed unnecessary. The promise undone. And Mary? She was not consulted. She had waited, obedient and prepared. Now her fate would be rewritten, not by love, not even by diplomacy, but by strategy. Instead of marrying the young prince she had been promised, Mary was sent to marry a man 3 decades her senior, the aging, ailing King of France. It was a bitter trade. She went with grace, but not without sorrow. Barely 3 months after their wedding, Louis XII died. Mary, now a teenage widow and former Queen of France, seized a rare opportunity. She married the man she loved, Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, her brother's closest friend. They wed in secret, and when Henry VIII found out, he was furious. But this time, love survived. As for Charles of Castile, he rose to become Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. He would battle Martin Luther, confront Henry VIII and shape European history. He would marry another, Isabella of Portugal, and rule an empire so vast it was said the sun never set upon it. He and Mary never met again, never spoke. Their betrothal faded, tucked between treaties and titles. But in the corridors of power, their broken engagement mattered. It had signaled England's pivot away from Spain and toward a stormier, more independent future. It was a promise written in gold ink and sealed with dynastic dreams. But history has little mercy for promises unfulfilled. And so, the marriage of Mary and Charles became not a union, but a quiet turning point in a world on the edge of reformation and empire. 5. Queen Christina of Sweden and Prince Charles of the Palatinet. She was crowned king, not queen, of Sweden. Bold, brilliant, unorthodox. A monarch who read Descartes by candlelight and refused to be anyone's bride. He was a prince, noble, handsome, well-connected, chosen by the court to tame her heart and secure the throne. But this was not a love story. This was a sovereign secret. A royal engagement that never bloomed. A marriage that never touched the wedding bed. And a queen who shocked the world, not by whom she loved, but by whom she didn't. This is the story of Queen Christina of Sweden and Prince Charles of the Palatinet, and the Virgin Queen who refused the crown's most sacred duty. Christina was no ordinary queen. Born in 1626, she was raised as her father's heir, trained in politics, philosophy, languages, and war. She walked like a soldier. She thought like a scholar. And in 1632, at just 6 years old, she became ruler of a Protestant empire at war. As she came of age, the pressure mounted. She must marry. She must produce an heir. She must do what queens were born to do. But Christina had other plans. In the 1640s, her court proposed Prince Charles Gustav of the Palatinet Zweibrücken, her cousin, a prince of good standing, familiar, loyal, and above all, male enough to balance her throne. Charles was smitten. He wanted her hand. The court approved. And Christina? She laughed. She admired Charles, she trusted him. But love, number desire, none. Time passed. Charles waited. Sweden held its breath. And then, in 1649, Christina stunned the world. I will never marry, she declared. I do not intend to give birth to heirs. The court froze. The nobility were horrified. Sweden, a kingdom battered by war and desperate for stability, had no precedent for this. But Christina was unmoved. She did the unthinkable. She abdicated. In 1654, she removed her crown and handed it, willingly, to the very man she was once expected to marry, Charles X, Gustav, and then she left. She fled Sweden, abandoned Protestantism, converted to Catholicism, and rode into Rome like a warrior philosopher in exile. She dined with cardinals, corresponded with philosophers, and scandalized Europe with her refusal to conform. Christina never married. She had relationships, intense, mysterious, deeply debated by historians, with both men and women. But she took her secret to the grave. Why had she rejected love? Why did she abandon the crown? Was it principle, or something far more personal? As for Charles Gustav, he ruled briefly and bloodily. He gave Sweden an heir, but also war. And Christina, watching from afar, never returned to power, in a world that measured queens by their wombs. Christina left the game entirely. She chose freedom over obedience, intellect over intimacy, a life of exile over a life of expectation. She was the queen who crowned herself king, the bride who never was, the virgin monarch who ruled, reigned, and ran, leaving behind a royal match that was never consummated, and a world that never quite knew what to make of her. History remembers the weddings that changed empires, but it often forgets the engagements that never made it to the altar. From royal tears behind closed doors to public rejections that shook nations, these 5 broken engagements remind us of a powerful truth. Even crowns can't command the heart. For every alliance lost, a legend was born, and for every cancelled union, a ripple of scandal still echoes through the halls of power. These were not love stories. They were warning signs, rebellions, and political gambits in silk and steel. If you were captivated by the drama behind these royal near marriages, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Which royal engagement would you have ended, and which one should have survived? Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and stay royal.